Good morning, class. Okay. Right now, we're going to talk about Ser and Estar, forms and functions of these two weird verbs. How do they function? How do you make them? Okay, we're going to talk all about that right now, as well as the verb saber and conocer a little later. So, ¿cuáles son las formas? What are the forms that Ser and Estar take when you conjugate them? So let's just take a look. For ser, we know it's an irregular yo verb, and it's going to be, the yo form is soy. Now, both of them are irregular in the yo forms, and they're both OY verbs. So we have estoy for estar. Whoops. Okay. And then now for the rest of them, ser is really special because it's irregular in all of its forms. Okay? Whereas estar is just going to follow the same pattern as other AR verbs. You're just going to put them on the end. For example, for tú, it is estás. Now, with all of these down here in this box, what you will find is that they all carry an accent, whereas the yo forms, okay, and the nosotros form do not. So estoy, and then nosotros would be estamos, without the accent. The accents are very important because they tell us that this is actually the verb estar. If you leave the accent off, it means another word, it means this, okay? So, here we go. So for él, ella, usted, the form it takes is está. Okay. Vosotros estáis, with an accent. And then we're also looking at él, ella, or ellos, ellas, ustedes, which is then están, with an accent over the A. Okay. Now let's take a look at the verb ser. It's one that's sometimes difficult to remember. The tú form is especially delicious. It becomes eres. And then the el, ella, usted form is pretty popular. Everybody knows it, es. Okay? Now, these two right here don't show any signs of being the verb ser, so you just kind of have to memorize them. And then over here for the nosotros form, it's somos. So we have some resemblance of the original verb. And if you'll know, they all have an O in it, okay? Even though it's an ER verb. So the vosotros form becomes sois. And then the last one, ellos, ellas, ustedes, becomes son. Okay? Now both verbs are irregular have irregular yo verbs, sorry. And ser has all irregular conjugations. Okay, so learn these two if you know the forms. Now we're going to go on to the functions. When do you We're going to start off with the verb ser. Okay? The first sign of knowing when a verb when you're going to use ser, we're going to look at its origin, okay, is the first one, of a person or thing. Where did something come from? So if you notice in these examples, we have Juan es de España. Juan is from Spain. When you're looking at origin, you're going to see this preposition, the preposition de. You can see it's in every one of these. El libro es de Guatemala. Okay, de indicates from. Mis primos son de Buenos Aires. My cousins are from Buenos Aires. So whenever we see from, aka de, and we're talking about is, and we're going to use ser or star, we're always going to use the verb ser with de. Okay? Now, we also use it when we're talking about identifying people, when we're identifying a person or a thing. For example, here we have él es el profesor de español. Okay, we have él es. We're identifying this individual as the professor of Spanish. So we're going to use the verb ser. All right, el coche rojo es nuevo. We're identifying the red car as a new car. It's very specific. All right, even though it gets old quick. We're identifying it as the new one. It's identification. It overruns all of them. Marta es la hermana de Pedro. Okay? In this particular case also, we're identifying Marta as la hermana de Pedro. Okay, Pedro's sister. Okay? So identification, kind of like this guy over here. Here's his identification. He is Peruvian. Now, if we were to say he is Peruvian, we'd use the verb ser because we're identifying him as Peruvian. Okay? All right. Now, if we said he's the brown-headed guy, because he was the color of his eyes. So we are identifying him as having brown eyes. We'll use the verb ser. Okay? Oh, crap. And of course, if we do that, now we have to finish it with a little smiley face. Because we're really happy. See? Happy, happy, happy. Okay, when we're talking about characteristics, very much like the other guy that we saw earlier, when we're dealing with the characteristics of the person, he has brown eyes, he's ugly, he's got a big nose, he looks like a ratoncito, okay? In all of those cases, we're going to use the verb ser. So Mateo's alto y guapo. We're describing him, his characteristics. He's tall and he's handsome, okay? Alejandra es muy inteligente y brillante. She's very intelligent and brilliant. Okay, another thing. This is a characteristic. El señor es viejo. Okay, he is old. We're describing him as an old person, right? So because we're doing that, it's a characteristic of the individual. La clase es aburrida. The class is boring. So this is considered a characteristic of the class. It's a permanent thing. Like normally, that class is extremely boring, okay? But not the Spanish, right? And then we also use the verb ser when we're dealing with time and date. All right, la hora y la fecha. So, for example, if we're going to ask what time is it, ¿qué hora es? Usamos el verbo ser. Okay. Son las 3 de la tarde. It is 3 in the afternoon. Again, we're using the verb ser. Now notice something, a little side note, a little side lesson here. Whenever you're giving the time, what you will do is this is going to dictate whether or not you're going to use the plural form or the singular form. And usually when we tell time, it's in the third person, singular or plural. Now, we're going to use the singular if we're saying it's 1 o'clock. Because there's only one. It's 1 hour. Es la una is what we would say. And then from 2 till 12, we're going to use son. Because we're saying it is 3 o'clock. It is 3 hours. Okay? Now, hoy es, because hoy is the subject, that has most of the bearing on the verb ser. So it's hoy es el 17 de enero, because we're telling the date. It's identifying what day it is in the month. All right, we're also used, like I mentioned earlier, when talking about origin, you'll see the preposition de. So anytime we're saying something is of something or from something, we're going to use the verb ser with it because it's identifying it also. Like, for example, possession. El libro es de María. It is of Maria. Or in our case, we'd say it is Maria's book. Okay? We're identifying the book as Maria's. It's hers. Now, when we're talking about material, we're saying characteristics of the object. For example, el pupitre es de metal y plástico. We're saying the student desk is made of metal and plastic. That's identification. Okay, what is it made of? All right? So anytime we're using it is or are, okay, whatever it might be, forms of the verb to be, and we're talking about were you going to be using the preposition de, we'll use the verb ser. Okay? Bueno. Now another piece, for you Spanish 2s, you can skip this, that's fine. For the Spanish 4 folks, la clase es a las 8. Now, we want to say this because, one, right here we're talking about an event, and we're saying this is the time that's going to take place. Because it's kind of a permanent thing when we're talking about an event. When is it going to be? All right? So, or better yet, it's also a characteristic of the event. For example, the party. The party is in my house. Though we're talking about the location, okay, and typically when we're talking about location, we use the verb estar. But in this case, la fiesta es en mi casa. We're talking about identifying where is the party. Where does it usually take place? It's a characteristic of the party. It is in my house. La fiesta es en mi casa. Los conciertos son en el parque. Typically what we're saying is the concerts are in the park. That's where they happen. If we arrive and no one's there, then we'd ask, well, where's the concert? ¿Dónde está el concierto? Because we're at the park, right? But in this case, we're saying, oh, where does the event take place? En el parque. Okay? We can have a discussion about this further in class if you'd like to. All right, so here's just a brief review of the verb ser when we use it. So when we use the verb ser, to be, we're going to use it when we talk about origin, identification, characteristics of an individual or thing, when we're telling time or giving the date, with the preposition de, and anytime we're talking about specific events. So let's take a look at the verb. Okay, cuando usamos estar, which also means to be, when we're dealing with the location of something, regardless. Madrid está en España. That's where it's located. Los estudiantes están en las clases. Where are they? They're in the classes. La tarea está en mi mochila. Okay, the homework is in my book bag. All right. So that's when we use the verb estar, when we're talking about the location of something. Where is it? Where are they? I can't see them. All right, and we can go there and we can find them. When we're talking about conditions, sometimes what we refer this to is feelings, but that's only part of it. If you're talking about your current condition, what are you in? Am I hurt? Am I sitting? What is it? Okay, we'll use the verb estar, the form of the verb to be. Mi madre está enferma. My mother is sick. Okay? So typically, because we're saying she is not feeling well, it's a current condition because it can change. Los estudiantes están aburridos. They are currently bored. Normally, the norm is that they are happy, right? They're engaged in what we're doing. But in this particular case, I hope it's not the case with you watching this video, is that they are bored. Oh, I'm so bored. I have nothing to do. Okay, I am scared. I am sad. Okay? La puerta está abierta. The current state of the door is that it is open. If it's closed, because it can change. It can become closed too. Okay? So, when we're talking about the conditions of things. All right, this is a pretty hairy one. So, this is not for Spanish 2. You can go ahead and skip it, but you can listen to it if you'd like to. Now, when we're talking about opinions, this is kind of a gray, not really gray area, because sometimes you can use one or the other. When we use the verb estar, when we're talking about our opinion, for example, let's look at the example. Tu hermana está bonita hoy. Your sister is pretty today. Meaning that, no, it doesn't necessarily mean that she was ugly yesterday. Normally she's really ugly, and today she happens to be very pretty. That's not necessarily true, though it could be. For example, they're a really ugly person, but today they look rather beautiful. But in this case, what you're saying is it's out of the norm. They look especially pretty, like she got all gussied up, right? Okay, she did her hair and cute little pigtails, and she looks happy, right? And she's standing there, and she's got this beautiful dress with her plug-like legs, okay? And she's just sitting there, all right? She dressed up in her best dress. Now, that you can say, está bonita. Oh, estás bonita. Ooh, you are pretty today. Meaning that normally your a characteristic is that you're pretty, but today you especially got dressed up. El pescado está bueno. Okay, the fish is good. Very good. Meaning it could be that normally sometimes the fish is not very good. It tastes bad. But today it's especially bueno. It's especially delicious. So something that's out of the norm. I think it's good. Yo creo que el pescado es muy bueno. Or está bueno. Okay, I think that the fish is good today. If you personally consider it a characteristic of the fish of this restaurant, you could use the verb ser. So you can use either one. It's all about what is the message that you're trying to communicate. So if you use the verb estar, you're stating it as your opinion. If you use the verb ser, you're stating it as a characteristic. Okay? So there's the difference there between ser and estar when dealing with opinions, when one of these could go either way. So you have to be careful about what kind of message you want to portray to the person. El señor Sánchez está joven cuando juega al fútbol. It means señor Sánchez is young when he plays football. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden, here's this old decrepit man, and he goes out and plays soccer, and all of a sudden he's 15 again. Whoa, what happened? He transformed. He's a beaver running out there, okay? No, that's not the case. What it's saying is he kind of acts young, when he's out there. He kind of becomes young once again, and he's all running around all happy, But he is an old man, okay? Está joven cuando juega al fútbol, okay? So there's the difference when we're dealing with opinions, okay? We'll use the verb estar if it's your opinion. And you have to be able to justify your answers when you use these, okay? If you can identify why you're using ser or estar, you know you're using it correctly. Okay, so let's look at saber versus conocer, okay? So both of these mean to know, okay? I like this guy. He's cool. He's awesome. So we know that both of these mean to know, and like ser and estar, we're going to use them for different cases, okay, in different occasions. So let's take a look at when we use saber and when do we use conocer. All right, but first, let's figure out the conjugations. Now, saber and conocer are also, just like ser and estar, irregular yo verbs, meaning that they're going to have an irregular form just in the yo form, and then the rest of them will follow the regular verb rules. They're both er verbs, so they'll have the er verb endings. So for conocer, because it has to conserve that se, conocer, okay, you can hear it, that C is like very smooth. It's got to conserve that sound. So that C is actually going to change to a Z. But it's a bit irregular. And this is what it becomes. Conozco. Okay, we leave the C in there, but we put this Z in there so you can still hear it. So it sounds like the original word, conocer, to know. All right, and then it becomes, in the rest of them, it follows the regular verb conjugations for ER verbs. So this one is going to be, es, okay, on the end of it. So it becomes conoces. Oh, whoops, I really messed that up. Okay, let's just do it this way. Can't write backwards, whatever. Conoces, okay? The next one, conoce. Nosotros conocemos. Vosotros conocéis. Okay? And then the last one, ellos, ellas, ustedes, is conocen. All right? Now let's look at the verb saber. Now it's especially different here in the yo form. You have to memorize it, okay? Because it does not follow the rules in any way. It doesn't really have a pattern, a reason why. It just does. It becomes two letters. Se, with an accent. Has to have it, okay? And the rest of them follow the regular verb conjugations for ER verbs. So it'd be sabes, sabe, sabemos, sabáis, with an accent over the y saben. Okay? And so there are the verb conjugations for conocer and saber. So let's dive into when do we use them. Here we go. When do you use conocer? Specifically, we use the verb conocer when we're talking about when we're familiar with something or acquainted with, as in a person or place or thing. For example, if I said, these guys, I should say, it also means to meet, when you meet someone for the first time. Okay? For example, in Finding Nemo, you have this giant shark. He swims up to Dora and, what's his bucket? I don't even remember his name. Marlin, okay? And he swines up to him and he gets to know them. He meets them for the first time. So when we say, for example, I know you, it means I'm familiar with you. I'm acquainted with who you are. Okay? Let's look at an example. Here are some examples. Yo conozco a tu hermana. I know your sister. All right? If I know your sister, meaning it's not information. I'm familiar with her. I know who she is. I've met her before. Nacho conoce la ciudad de Madrid. Now, when you're talking about places, it's very interesting. You're very familiar with the place. You can walk around the streets. You know where to go to get good pastis. You know where to get good food, right? Okay, you're familiar with the area. Nosotros vamos a conocer al presidente mañana, meaning we're going to know the president or meet the president tomorrow. We're going to become familiar with him, meet him personally. So conocer is more about experience. Something you have to experience for yourself. Okay, you know it for yourself because you've experienced it. It's nothing, you can't share that. You can share the experience with someone, but they won't know it or experience it for themselves until they actually go and do it. They can't know your sister if they've never met her. They have to meet her first. They can't know Madrid unless they go there and be there themselves, even though I tell them all about it. They don't know Madrid because they haven't been yet. Nosotros vamos a conocer. They will never know the president until they actually go and meet him. Okay? Experience. That's when you use the verb conocer. Now let's look at another one. Saber. Okay, when do you use saber? All right? To know. Information in your head right here. Obviously, she does not know how to ski. Otherwise, she would not have fallen. So she doesn't have that knowledge right here in her head. It's flying out of her hair as she plummets down into the cold, freezing water and loses her mind. Okay? To have knowledge of, you're aware of it. To know how to do something. Okay? An action. Let's look at a few examples. For example, yo sé quién es el presidente de los Estados Unidos. I know who the president of the United States is. The difference here, I know who he is, I know his name, but I don't know him personally. I haven't met him. Okay? So that's when we use the verb saber. Los estudiantes saben hablar español bien. They know how, in this case, ellos saben hablar español bien. They know how to speak well, Spanish well. Notice how in here, we didn't put como. Now we could, los estudiantes saben cómo hablar español bien, but it's not really necessary. We don't have to put that, right? Because it's implied when we say los estudiantes saben hablar, when we use the infinitive here, hablar español bien. They know how to speak Spanish well. So when we're talking about how to do something, that's when we're going to use the verb saber. Antonio sabe esquiar muy bien. Antonio knows how to ski very well, all right? Another thing. When we're talking about knowing how to do something, all right, we're going to use the verb saber, okay? So that's the difference between saber and conocer. Let me see. Okay, now you get them, all right? Go get them. But first, let's recap for saber and conocer. Okay, so for saber, it does mean to know, but we're talking about information, right? And yes, that is an RM, okay? Information, something you can store in your own brain. Okay, right here, all right? It's in the head, okay? And it's also something that you can share out with someone else, and then they too can have it in their brain, okay? Because you gave it to them. It's information that can be shared. If I know how to speak Spanish, I can teach you how to speak Spanish. Conocer, we use it, and it's all about experience. Or meeting somebody. It's synonymous with meet, to meet. All right? So if you're using to meet and you're talking about knowing, you're going to use conocer. And if you're talking about information, something you store in your head or how to do something, you're going to use the verb saber. All right? Good job. Now go get them. All right? If you have any questions, you can come and speak with me or send me a message via Edmodo. Goodbye.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.